Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. Now that my two informative videos are done for the day, it's time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And we're going to do this one as a semi-informative video because the second video I did today was kind of talking about just the way I approach some stuff that really wasn't as informative directly in terms of training, nutrition, anything like that. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about Stefanie Cohen, the power lifter. So let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and yeah, we'll go into some of this. Because I covered her a few weeks back, and I've later done a little bit of other research. And I watched an interview, the entire interview she did on a CrossFit-oriented channel called, I think it's called Barbell Shrugged. I don't necessarily agree with everything on that channel, but they do get some really good interviews. And they had a good interview with her, and she talked quite a bit about her training philosophy. Now, I know some of what she's doing may have shifted because she's selling some hybrid templates. But what I thought was interesting is, remember what I've been saying for just a little bit, guys? That maybe for people who are trying to become more athletic, particularly people who are strength athletes, maybe just power lifters, who want to be more well-rounded, that looking into things like Olympic lifts and similar type movements as our accessory work, like for me, I'm doing a lot of power cleans. Power cleans are probably my primary accessory right now because I focus on 4 basic lifts and I rotate between rows and chin-ups. But I have 4 exercises I focus on, my classic lifts, power lifts, and then the overhead press. I'm rebuilding my base right now. And I do a lot of power cleaning, trying to master the power clean. And I've said later I'll probably start incorporating some Olympic lifts when I get my raw squat back to 500. I'll start messing with some Olympic lifts. So it's kind of a long-term goal, but I have to do this in steps. I really need to build my base back on certain lifts. I can't be squatting 450 and benching 315 and start worrying about stuff like that. I've got to rebuild my base on these exercises I quit doing to get my strength base back. But I've been saying that for a little while, that I think that might be the way forward. I think some of these higher level athletes and even some of these CrossFit people are right about this. And lo and behold, I go check out this interview she does, and I like to know what some of the top lifters in the world are doing. I think it gives us not always the best approach to follow, but some ideas. Because we know the best lifters in the world are usually genetic freaks. We know they're probably using drugs a lot of us aren't going to be willing to use, at least in those amounts. So we can't take what they say as gospel. But it's interesting to see what they're doing and see if it can be applied to other things. And what I thought was interesting is that she had said at that time she focused on just 5 exercises. And the way she broke it down, some people say, no, she's doing a lot more than 5. But what I think she means is that 5 and they're very close variations. In other words, she does the power lifts and then the Olympic lifts because she competed in Olympic lifting after she was a competitive soccer player and, well, pro-level soccer player pretty much, and a D1 athlete. She went into Olympic lifting and then she jumped into powerlifting, and she felt like the powerlifting actually improved her Olympic lifting. But because she loved Olympic lifting, she was leaving it in. And so she focused around those 5 exercises, and that's basically what she did. And of course, she said, she sometimes would, off-season, maybe conventional deadlift to correct muscle imbalances because the sumo deadlift's what she competes in, but she would do conventional. So we're still dealing with the deadlift. Those are both competition legal variations. Of course, then people will be like, well, she does a lot of front squats and other stuff. Yeah, because that's part of the 2 Olympic lifts, and people need to remember that. Olympic lifters, when they're working on their 2 competition lifts, the snatch and the clean and jerk, you need to understand those are movements with different phases in them. And a lot of lifts that you would think of as single lifts are trained because they are part of the movement. Okay, like the power clean, which you do a full clean and then you do a jerk for the clean and jerk. Well, the full clean involves a front squat. So training the front squat is training that lift. It's training the competition lift directly because it's part of the movement. Because a power clean isn't necessarily the Olympic lift. The full clean is, and then you jerk the weight. So there's a clean off the floor into a front squat and then an overhead press component. And so they'll even oftentimes train even the push press, sometimes as an example, as part of the movement, even though the jerk itself isn't exactly a push press. You can actually lift more weight on a jerk. But you guys get the idea. Same thing, an overhead squat is part of the snatch, so it's an exercise that's utilized. And so she seems to do that, and just direct variations of those things. Like you go look at her channel, she does goblet squats and things like that, stiff leg deadlifts, but she's still sticking to a squat and a deadlift. She's not coming in and doing leg extensions as a squat accessory. You don't see leg press and things like that. They're still the same basic movement patterns. And that seems to be what she focuses around, and that's a big part of what she does. There's a high degree of specificity. And the interesting thing with training like this is because everything that she is doing has a direct carryover, they're just variations, it starts to eliminate weak points. And I think what people need to look at here, look at her physique. All right, look at her physique. Does she have any underdeveloped muscles anywhere in her body? If you were to look at her physique as someone who wants to look better, and I'm talking even as a dude, we don't necessarily need to talk about women here because I understand she can get pretty, when she's really lean, she looks too extreme for most women. When she's not lean, she doesn't so much. But for guys looking at that, do you see anything underdeveloped on her? Is there any part of her that's underdeveloped? No. She's got biceps, she's got rear delts, she's got everything. Everything is well developed, top to bottom. And that's essentially from just doing variations of these exercises, because every single muscle is being hit. And yeah, I know later it looks like she's added in a few curls and stuff, light curls and things like that. But again, when that interview was done, she still had a complete physique. And that's the interesting thing. Everything has direct carryover. And then she talked about rep ranges and stuff too. And we'll jump to that because you guys remember when Jamie Lewis came into powerlifting? Jamie had some similar philosophies. Everything was about lifting heavy all the time. Like Jamie just doesn't believe in high reps. All right, and the guy is shredded and stupidly strong. I mean, he came in and deadlifted, 670? And was squatting over 600 raw in the 181 class. All right, he came in and crushed powerlifting records, having come from other strength sports, wrestling and everything else, because he said powerlifting is a joke and powerlifters train like a joke. Well, Jamie's big on every time you go to the gym, you need to do squats of some type. Doesn't matter if it's a back squat, high bar, low bar, front squat. You squat every time you go to the gym. You pull every time you go to the gym. Doesn't matter whether it's a deadlift and the chin up or row, but you pull and you do some sort of press. And he prefers overhead pressing. All right, he walked in and crushed powerlifting, became a world record holder for total his second powerlifting meet. Now keep in mind, he almost broke the records his first meet ever. Walked into his second meet, broke records. And the guy is absurdly jacked, and he is peeled. He's big on all that stuff. You even see him talking about the merits of overhead squatting and everything else. But you're kind of getting the idea here. Everything being done is just about making sure that you're doing variations of just the basic lifts, and lifting heavy. Jamie doesn't believe in high reps. Now, what was interesting with her, you're kind of seeing the same thing, because she was asked in that interview, how do you stay in a weight class? She's like, well, obviously it's about nutrition, it's about caloric intake, but also it's about making sure that your strength stays pace with your body weight. In other words, and I disagree partially when she's saying that you can get stronger without gaining any muscle. You can't, but what I think the point is that you can shift the ratios. And we know that from the research. Look at Brad Schoenfeld's studies. Doing high volumes of triples puts on just as much muscle mass as hypertrophy range, but it gives you more strength. People will argue, though, it takes longer in the gym. Yeah, it does. It does. It takes more time to do 7 triples with 3 to 5 minutes between than it does to come in and do 3 sets of 10. It takes over double the time. But you gain all the muscle. It's hypertrophy training, but more strength. And that's ultimately a lot of what this comes down to also. By doing very low reps all the time, you make sure that every single drop of muscle that you gain, every last ounce of muscle that you put on your body puts pounds on your lifts. And that's kind of the idea. And that's kind of what she mentions, is do lots of low rep training. You don't really see videos of her doing much in the way of reps. 3, 4, 5. Jamie does 1 to 3. But come in and do 20 singles. 90% of your max do 20 individual reps with it. 20 sets of 1 on deadlifts. I mean, he does stuff like that. But, you know, we're starting to see something in common there between these champions. They're both, again, manage their diets very well. They tend to be very, very lean. And they also show strength athletes don't have to be fat, particularly if you're going to compete in a weight class. I mean, do either one of these people, when you look at either one of them, do you look at them and say, man, look at that fat power lifter? I don't think so. But there's some things in common, and they are both ultra elite top lifters who are basically crushing records and have crushed records. There's some things in common there. They're all about variations of the basic exercises, focusing on the basics, doing variations, because what happens when you do variations? You bring up all the little weak points, meaning if you've got weak links on the deadlift, let's say you are a sumo puller, you could do conventional deadlift, you do deficit deadlifts, you could do snatch grip deadlifts. You know what? You do the variations, particularly in the off season when you're not worried about peaking for a meet, when you are gaining any muscle, what happens? All the little weak links and muscles that might be weak links in your pattern, hypertrophy. If you're doing just variations of the big lifts, and the ones you're going to use, and the strength standards are based around overhead pressing, snatching, power clean, squat, deadlift, bench, all that stuff. You're doing just variations of those things instead of doing silly, absurd stuff. And I'm like a lot of guys, all the bands and chains and everything else that raw lifters shouldn't be doing. When you're doing close variations and just varying the lifts, floor press instead of flat bench, close grip instead of flat bench, overhead press, you could do strict press, you can do push press, whatever. The thing is, the variations that you do of these exercises bring up all the weak points usually in your physique, because they work whatever muscles might be lagging, because each of these, they change the emphasis just slightly on different muscles, different heads of the muscles. If you're doing stuff like this, it eliminates the benefits of pretty much isolation work. Now, it is all about recovery. You're going to have to recover because everything is working a ton of muscle. But when you look at it this way, a person can basically pick about 4 or 5 different movement patterns, train those movement patterns top to bottom, do some variations of them to avoid stagnation and to bring up weak links, and be brutally strong across the board and focus upon lifting heavy weights, not doing too much reps, so that you get strong. Because here's the thing, the stronger you get, the more workload you can generate and the more volume you generate. In other words, squatting 500 pounds 3 times is still more volume than squatting 400 pounds 3 times. And people need to understand that difference. You increase your volume 25%. When we say volume is the primary driver of hypertrophy, that includes the tension part. All right, it's not doing 1 set of 3, it's 1 set of 3 with X amount of weight. The weight matters for hypertrophy. But that's the thing, is that this type of training that they're doing, everything has a direct strength carryover to another movement. And you take either one of these lifters, and you know, she's kind of coming out with the same thing of a hybrid style of training. They don't have any weak links. These are people who are strong in every plane of motion. These aren't people who are just strong at the squat, bench, and deadlift. These are people who can snatch, power clean, push press. Because everything they do is essentially still a big full body movement, and everything is close enough and carryover to all the different big lifts that they're strong all the way across the board. And you look at her training, and I think it shows. I mean, woman deadlifts over 500 pounds as a 123-pound woman. She's benching over 200. She power cleans over 200. All right. No weak links anywhere. Every single muscle is well developed. Again, I think there's something to be said for training in this manner. Because I really think, in a way, it's different, but it really isn't from some of the stuff that Jamie Lewis coined with chaos and pain. A lot of the concepts are the same. You focus on low reps with big movements and variations of your basic lifts, and you leave no movement pattern untrained. No big movement pattern. A lot of overhead pressing, a lot of squat variations, a lot of deadlift variations. The net result, you put it in someone with the right genetics and the right combination, they become world champions and basically crush everybody. And they have extremely well developed physiques. Again, something some of the physique guys might need to start looking at, because that's the direction everything is going with this whole functional fitness thing. And I know functional fitness is a buzz phrase. It's silly. And it's not always utilized the way that people try to use it. Again, a lot of silly stuff is done in the name of functional fitness. But that is the direction the fitness world is going. And I think a lot of the bodybuilders and people who are physique oriented are about to realize they're about to be left behind. Because things like CrossFit are growing. Functional fitness parts of gyms are starting to take over the machine areas. All right, a lot of big global gyms have said for a lot of their bigger places, they are moving machines out and putting more racks and more platforms in for Olympic barbells and power racks in place of where some of the machines were. Like CEOs of companies have said this. All right, that's the way training is going. In other words, we're getting to a point to where people aren't expected to just look the part. The trend in the industry is for people to be able to perform as effectively as they look. And I think a lot of these hybrid training styles are really going to move forward. And again, when we start seeing people who are doing these sorts of ideas into training or walking in and crushing sports like powerlifting, that's only going to push it forward further. So it's just interesting for people to look at and take a look at and analyze. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.